You know, it's amazing how much we rely on oil and gas every single day here in the U.S.
Absolutely.
I mean, fueling our cars, heating homes, even the plastics in, well, everything. It's foundational.
It really is.
But how does that whole system actually work? What's the journey those resources take?
Right. That's what you're diving into today, specifically the U.S. oil and gas industry. You shared some really interesting materials,
Yeah.
and we're going to unpack that whole supply chain right here in the U.S.
Mm.
So from finding it, pulling it out, getting it processed,
Well,
moved.
enticed even.
Exactly. Pricing, transportation, the whole thing.
We'll look at the infrastructure, the pipelines, the service companies that do a lot of the work, and also the tech side. It seems like technology is always pushing things forward.
Constantly evolving.
So the goal here is really to give everyone listening a solid, clear picture of this pretty intricate world within the U.S. Keep it engaging, easy to grasp.
Sounds good.
Okay, so where do we start? The very beginning, I guess. Finding the stuff.
That's right. We start with the upstream. That's all about the search for and the extraction of oil and gas resources here in the States.
Okay.
And the key players initially are the petroleum geologists. They're like earth detectives,
Yeah.
looking for very specific geological setups. You need source rocks where the oil and gas actually formed, and then traps structures that hold it in place.
That combination is critical, right? Otherwise, it just escapes.
Precisely. The trap stops the hydrocarbons from migrating all the way to the surface.
But it's not like they have an X-ray machine for the whole country, is it? I mean, finding these spots must be tough.
Oh, it's incredibly challenging. Even with advanced tech like seismic surveys.
Right, the sound wave things.
Yeah, they create images of what's below ground. But even then, the average success rate for finding a commercial deposit is maybe 20–25%.
Wow, that low. So a lot of dry holes.
A significant number. And think about the cost of drilling those dry holes. That investment with zero return gets factored into the economics of the successful wells, ultimately into energy prices.
Okay, so they think they found a good spot. What happens next in the U.S. system? Leasing.
Exactly. The U.S. uses lease auctions. Companies bid for the rights to explore and potentially produce oil and gas on specific blocks of land or, importantly, offshore areas like the Gulf of Mexico.
Ah, yes, the Gulf. I remember reading something about the Deepwater Royalty Relief Act there.
Yeah.
What was that about?
That was legislation aimed at encouraging exploration in the really deep parts of the Gulf, which are government-owned waters.
Deeper means more expensive, more difficult.
Much more so. So for leases granted back then, companies didn't have to pay the usual royalties unless oil and gas prices hit certain benchmark levels. The idea was to spur activity when prices were lower.
Did it work?
It incentivized activity, yes. But later on, analyses suggested the government might have missed out on substantial royalty payments because of it. So, a policy with definite trade-offs.
Interesting. Okay, so a company gets a lease. How do they figure out how much oil or gas is actually down there? Can't be precise?
It's definitely an estimation, but a highly educated one. This is where we get the term proved reserve.
Proved reserves. Okay.
It's an estimate based on analyzing direct evidence, like those seismic surveys we mentioned, and data from exploratory wells, called well logs, and interpreting all that geological and engineering data. Economics plays a huge role too.
How so?
Well, if the cost to get it out is higher than what you could sell it for, it doesn't count as proved. It has to be commercially recoverable under current economic conditions and using existing technology.
So there's a standard for this.
Yes, the generally accepted definition requires something like a 90% probability or better that you can actually recover those reserves.
90%. Okay, that feels pretty solid. So who are the companies actually doing the drilling and pumping in the U.S.? Is it just the huge names we know?
You definitely have the big players, the international oil companies or IOCs like ExxonMobil. They operate globally, handle massive projects, but a really vital part of the U.S. industry, maybe the critical lifeblood for day-to-day operations, are the smaller independent firms, often called juniors.
Juniors, okay.
They typically produce maybe 500 to 10,000 barrels of oil equivalent per day. They might not have the global reach, but they are often the ones doing a lot of the actual drilling and production work on the ground here.
So the IOCs maybe handle the mega projects, the strategy, and the juniors are the workhorses.
That's a good way to put it, yeah.
Yeah.
And no matter the size, getting oil and gas out costs money, significant money.
Right.
We talk about finding costs, everything spent on exploration, and then development costs.
That's after you found something worth producing.
Exactly. Once a discovery looks commercial, You commit to developing it. And those costs, they can vary wildly. Offshore is way more expensive than onshore. The size of the field, the geology, the tech needed, it all adds up.
Okay, so they've drilled the well. Does the oil and gas just flow out on its own? Or do they need to encourage it?
Well, initially, yes. That's primary recovery. It uses the natural pressure in the reservoir. But that pressure doesn't last forever.
So you need other methods.
Right.
Right.
That's secondary recovery. A common technique is water flooding, injecting water to push more oil towards the production wells and keep the pressure up.
Okay.
And then you have tertiary or enhanced oil recovery, EOR.
Enhanced. Sounds advanced.
It is. These are more complex methods, sometimes injecting steam or chemicals or gases like carbon dioxide. The goal is to change the oil's properties, make it flow more easily.
That sounds expensive.
It absolutely can be.
Mhm.
These EOR projects, even here in the U.S., require significant investment and sophisticated engineering. You mentioned Gorgon LNG earlier. That's a huge gas project example. But similar complexity and cost apply to major U.S. EOR oil projects.
And even with all that, you don't get everything out.
No, often a substantial amount remains trapped. That's why you also see well intervention.
Going back into old wells.
Exactly. Doing repairs, upgrades, maybe drilling sideways from the existing well to reach pockets missed before. It's all about effective reservoir management.
Using data and tech to maximize recovery over time.
Precisely. Using data analysis, modeling, applying new technologies. That's how some U.S. fields, like Chevron's Kern River field in California, have stayed productive for over a century. Constant innovation.
So technology is key, not just for finding new stuff, but getting the most out of what we've already found.
Absolutely critical throughout the upstream. Improving exploration success, making drilling safer and more efficient, enhancing recovery. The drive for innovation is constant, especially in challenging places like the Deepwater Gulf.
Okay, upstream covered. The oil and gas are out of the ground. What's next? Midstream.
Correct. Midstream is the bridge. It's about processing and transportation within the U.S. Let's start with natural gas.
Okay.
When it comes out of the well, raw natural gas is, well, not just methane, it's a mix.
What else is in there?
You've got oil, water, condensate, valuable stuff called natural gas liquids, or NGLs, think propane, ethane.
Used for heating or plastics, right?
Exactly. Plus impurities like sulfur, carbon dioxide. So some initial processing often happens right near the wellhead. Using things like scrubbers and heaters to remove some water and heavier components prevent freezing in pipes.
A quick cleanup crew.
Sort of, but to get it ready for the big pipelines, to make it dry gas suitable for homes and businesses across the U.S., it has to go to centralized processing plants.
More sophisticated cleaning there.
Much more. They remove the remaining impurities. The NGLs are separated out to be sold, sulfur removed, CO2 removed. Got to meet strict pipeline quality specs to avoid corrosion or blockages.
And how does the gas get from all the wells to these plants?
Through gathering systems. It's this huge web of smaller pipelines collecting gas from numerous wells across a production area and feeding it into the processing facility.
Wow, that's a lot of plumbing. What about moving the oil and the processed gas long distances?
Pipelines are the workhorse for both in the U.S. The natural gas pipeline network is actually the largest because it has to reach practically every city and neighborhood.
And we produce a lot in certain areas, but use it everywhere, right?
That's a key point. Production is concentrated, largely south and west. Consumption is heavy in the Northeast, Midwest, Pacific West. So you need these massive long-haul pipelines crossing the country to connect supply and demand.
Just makes sense. You can't truck or train that kind of volume efficiently.
Not even close. And something important happened with natural gas transport in the U.S. deregulation.
I think I read about that. What changed?
Starting back in the 80s, regulations changed to separate or unbundle the transportation service from the actual sale of the gas. Before, pipeline companies often controlled both.
So what did unbundling do?
It allowed independent gas sellers or marketers to pay the pipeline companies just for transportation space. It opened up access, fostered competition. Ideally, that meant more choices and potentially lower costs for customers in the U.S.
More of an open market then.
That was the goal. Now, for oil pipelines in the U.S., they're usually steel, sometimes specialized plastic, often buried for safety, which adds to the cost.
Getting more complex.
Yeah, regulations are stricter, and they need to handle many different grades of crude oil, plus refined products like gasoline and diesel, sometimes in the same pipe.
How do they manage that? Sending different things down the same line?
They send them in batches, and there's innovation there too, like something called precision batch cutting, or PBC.
PBC, what's that?
It's technology to make a cleaner separation between different types of fuel batches as they move through the pipe. It minimizes the amount of mixture, the off-spec stuff you get where, say, diesel meets gasoline, reduces product loss, boosts efficiency.
Smart. Minimizing waste is always good. Okay, one more midstream piece. LNG, liquefied natural gas. How does that fit into the U.S. picture?
LNG has become really significant, especially for trade. Natural gas is, well, a gas. Hard to transport long distances unless you have a pipeline.
Right.
So LNG is natural gas cooled way, way down, like minus 260 Fahrenheit until it becomes a liquid.
Takes up much less space.
About 600 times less volume. That makes it economical to ship overseas in specialized tankers. It basically unlocked global markets for gas.
And the U.S. is involved in this.
Big time. The U.S. has built large LNG liquefaction plants to cool the gas and export it. We also have regasification terminals to potentially import it, though right now the U.S. is a major exporter.
But building those plants must be expensive.
Extremely. Liquefying gas takes a lot of energy. The facilities are complex. Costs depend on location, regulations, size. It's a massive infrastructure investment.
Okay, so LNG lets U.S. gas travel the world.
Got it. We've covered upstream and midstream. Let's move downstream. Refining and marketing in the U.S.
Right. Downstream is where crude oil gets turned into the products we actually use every day in the U.S. Gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, heating oil.
And feedstocks for other industries, like plastics.
Exactly. Petrochemical feedstocks are a key output. The main job of a refinery is to separate crude oil's components and then process them into these finished products.
It sounds simple, separate the crude oil, but I imagine it's more complicated. Oh, vastly more complicated. Modern U.S. refineries are incredibly sophisticated chemical plants. They use a whole range of processes, and the technology is always improving to lower costs, cut emissions, get more valuable products out of each barrel.
What are some of those key processes?
Well, it starts with distillation, separating by boiling points, but then you need to change the molecules. That's where cracking comes in, thermal, catalytic, steam cracking, breaking big, heavy molecules into smaller, more useful ones like gasoline components.
Okay.
Then other processes like isomerization, polymerization, alkylation. They rearrange molecules or combine them to make higher quality blend components. Alkylation, for instance, makes high-octane stuff for gasoline. And we can't forget the history. The phase-out of leaded gasoline in the U.S. was a major downstream change.
Right, for environmental reasons. I've also heard about refinery complexity. Why is that important in the U.S.?
Refinery complexity is basically a measure of how sophisticated a refinery is, how capable it is of processing a wide range of crude oils.
Including the less desirable ones.
Exactly. Including the heavier, often sulfurous, cheaper crudes. And critically, how capable it is of turning those tougher crudes into a high percentage of valuable products like gasoline and diesel.
So more complex equals more flexible?
More flexible and generally more profitable. Refineries with advanced units like cookers or hydrotreaters can handle those challenging crudes and meet strict U.S. product specifications, like California's fuel rules. Think of it like a basic kitchen versus a gourmet kitchen.
The gourmet kitchen can handle more ingredients and make fancier dishes.
Precisely. More complexity gives refiners an edge, especially when processing those heavier crudes that are abundant globally. It lets them capitalize on the price difference between light and heavy oils.
So they're constantly figuring out which crudes to buy.
Absolutely. U.S. refiners use complex economic models. They look at their refinery's configuration, the current market prices for different crudes, the expected demand for gasoline, diesel, jet fuel, etc., and figure out the optimal crude slate to maximize their profit or margin.
Margin, like the crack spread.
Exactly. The crack spread is a rough indicator of the refining margin, the difference between the price of crude oil and the price of the products made from it. Refiners often use futures markets to hedge their risk related to these price differences.
Interesting that you mentioned the number of U.S. refineries has gone down, but capacity is up?
Yeah, it's a key trend. Fewer refineries, but the remaining ones have often expanded, added more complex units, becoming much more efficient and larger scale, consolidation and upgrading.
Okay, so the products are refined. How do they get to us, the consumers, across the U.S.?
Through various marketing channels. Refiners might own their own gas stations, the big brand names. They also sell fuel to independent dealers who operate stations under that refiner's brand. Or they sell to jobbers, wholesalers, who supply a network of unbranded or independently branded stations. And then you have large retailers like Costco getting in the game, buying fuel wholesale and selling it themselves, plus sales into bulk spot markets.
Seems like a lot of competition at the pump. Is the gasoline really different between brands?
Often not as much as you might think. In the U.S., gasoline is largely treated as a commodity. Fuel for different refineries often gets mixed together in the pipeline system and stored in shared terminals.
Really? So the shell gas might have some ExxonMobil molecules in it?
It's quite possible, even likely in many regions. The fuel has to meet certain specifications, of course, but the base gasoline might come from multiple sources before additives are put in at the terminal. Quick Trip, a big fuel retailer, has been open about this. They buy quality fuel on the wholesale market.
So the brand might be more about additives, station convenience, loyalty programs.
Largely, yes. And it contributes to the intense price competition we see, which leads to price volatility.
Yeah, prices seem to jump around all the time.
They do. It reflects crude oil costs, refinery operations if a unit goes down, supply tightens, seasonal demand changes, transport costs, inventories, a whole mix of factors. The FTC monitors U.S. prices, and they consistently find market factors are the main drivers.
And we shouldn't forget planes. Aviation fuel is crucial too.
Absolutely. Mostly kerosene-type jet fuel, vital for the U.S. airline industry.
Okay. So from wellhead to gas pump or jet engine, quite the journey. Let's shift to pricing itself. How does that work for crude oil in the U.S.?
Pricing has evolved. Way back, transportation cost was king. Now, benchmark crudes are key. In the U.S., the main benchmark is WTI.
West Texas Intermediate, we hear that quoted constantly. Why WTI?
It's a specific type of crude light and sweet, meaning low sulfur, produced in the U.S. Its price, specifically at the delivery hub in Cushing, Oklahoma, acts as the primary reference point for pricing most other crude oils produced domestically.
And how are deals actually done? Spot markets, futures?
All of the above in the U.S. You have spot transactions for immediate delivery. Then there's the futures market, like on the NYMEX, the New York Mercantile Exchange for buying or selling oil for delivery at a future date, and also longer-term contracts between producers and refiners.
Spot reflects today's situation. Futures look ahead.
Generally, yes. Futures markets give clues about market expectations and allow companies to hedge against price swings.
And what makes those prices swing so much?
Fundamentally, it's supply and demand. How much is being produced versus how much is needed. Inventory levels in the U.S. are also a huge factor. How much oil is in storage.
Okay.
But also geopolitical events anywhere in the world can ripple through. Decisions by major producers outside the U.S. Even weather, impacting heating demand or driving season demand. It's like a complex brew.
What about natural gas pricing in the U.S.? Is it tied to oil?
Not so much anymore. In the U.S. market, gas and oil prices have largely decoupled.
Really? Why?
The boom in U.S. shale gas production massively increased supply, creating its own market dynamics. So U.S. gas prices are more influenced now by factors like domestic production levels, demand for heating in winter, demand for power generation, storage levels, and increasingly LNG exports and imports.
So separate drivers for oil and gas prices within the U.S. mostly?
Largely, yes, though of course they're both energy commodities, so there can be some indirect links.
We mentioned OPEC earlier. Even focusing on the U.S., do they still matter for our prices?
It's a fair question. The global oil market is connected. OPEC tries to coordinate production among its members to, ideally, stabilize prices. Their decisions can definitely influence global supply, which then affects the benchmarks like WTI that influence U.S. prices.
But they don't completely control things.
No, definitely not. Their ability to dictate prices is debatable. The rise of U.S. shale oil production from Russia, other non-OPEC countries, it all counterbalances OPEC's influence. They're a major factor, but not the only one.
Okay, so U.S. markets have their own strong dynamics, but are still part of that global picture. Now, besides the companies finding and refining, there are the service companies, right? What do they do in the U.S.?
Ah, yes, the oil field service companies. They're absolutely essential. These are the contractors providing specialized equipment, services, and expertise for pretty much every stage.
So the oil companies, the E&Ps, don't do it all themselves?
Not usually, no. Service companies provide the drilling rigs and crews. They conduct the seismic surveys. They do the well logging to evaluate formations, the cementing, the hydraulic fracturing.
Fracking, right.
Yes. Companies like Halliburton, Schlumberger, BJ Services. They provide these crucial completion and production services. It's a huge sector.
And is the trend for E&P companies to use lots of different service providers, or?
Actually, the trend in the U.S. seems to be towards E&P companies preferring to work with a smaller group of major suppliers. Companies that can offer integrated services, maybe even turnkey solutions, where they manage a whole bundle of services for a project.
Streamlining things.
Potentially, yeah. It requires really tight collaboration, though, between the oil company operating the project, the main service contractors, and all the subcontractors involved. Especially on complex U.S. projects, coordination is key.
A whole ecosystem of specialized players working together. Okay, finally, we've kind of woven it throughout, but let's explicitly talk technology and innovation across the U.S. sector.
It's the lifeblood, really. Continuous innovation is non-negotiable for the U.S. oil and gas industry.
Why so critical?
Several reasons. Driving down costs is huge. Improving efficiency, getting more out for less input, whether it's drilling faster or refining more effectively. Enhancing safety is paramount. And meeting environmental regulations, which are always evolving.
We saw examples already: better exploration tech, enhanced oil recovery.
Exactly. Better seismic imaging reduces dry holes. EOR gets more oil out. In refining, new catalysts and process designs boost yield of valuable fuels and reduce waste. In midstream, better pipeline monitoring and maintenance, like that precision batch cutting, it's everywhere.
And it has to keep going, right? The challenges don't stop.
Not at all. The industry is always pushing into tougher environments, deeper water offshore, more complex shale formations onshore. Plus, the pressure to reduce emissions, manage water use, minimize the overall environmental footprint that demands constant technological advancement. New materials, better data analytics, smarter operational practices.
So innovation isn't just nice to have, it's fundamental to the U.S. industry's future.
Absolutely fundamental. It's this dynamic interplay, finding and extracting, moving and processing, market forces, service company expertise, and that relentless technological push that defines the sophisticated U.S. oil and gas landscape today.
Wow. Okay, that really paints a comprehensive picture. We've gone from geologists hunting for traps miles underground, through massive pipeline networks and complex refineries, looked at how prices are set, the role of service specialists, and underscored this constant need for innovation. It's definitely not simple.
Far from it. It's a highly complex, interconnected machine, especially here in the U.S.
So, reflecting on all this, what's a key takeaway?
I think it's the sheer integration required. From the science of finding it to the engineering of extracting and processing it, the logistics of moving it, the economics of selling it, and the technology underpinning it all. Every piece relies on the others in the U.S. system.
Yeah, that interconnectedness really comes through. And maybe a final thought to leave folks with, something to chew on.
Well, thinking about this whole intricate U.S. system we've just unpacked, how does it navigate the future? You have the undeniable ongoing energy demand within the U.S. needing these fuels. But you also have the increasing focus on environmental sustainability, climate concerns, the rise of alternatives.
The balancing act.
Exactly. How will technological innovation within oil and gas itself, combined with broader market forces and policy decisions, shape the trajectory of this vital U.S. industry as it coexists and competes within that evolving energy landscape?
Yeah.
That intersection, that's the really fascinating space to watch going forward.